The EU cannot survive. Unelected Ursula von der Leyen said the EU has the values of the Talmud. Did she ever read it? If so, she knows it is profoundly satanic. The EU was set up to stop incessant French-German wars, except now it exported them to other parts of the world and uses air bases to illegally bomb others. The many contradictions. It is all a deception. If you are interested to find out what the Talmud says, for example, about Jesus and about the Virgin Mary, it is truly disgusting. What are the main values of the EU? This is quoted. Human dignity. Human dignity is inviolable. It must be respected, protected, and constitutes the real basis of fundamental rights. Freedom. Freedom of movement gives citizens the right to move and reside freely within the Union. Individual freedoms such as respect for private life, freedom of thought, religion, assembly, expression, and information are protected by the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. Democracy. The functioning of the EU is founded on representative democracy. A European citizen automatically enjoys political rights. Every adult EU citizen has the right to stand as a candidate and to vote in elections to the European Parliament. EU citizens have the right to stand as a candidate and to vote in their country of residence or in their country of origin. Equality. Equality is about equal rights for all citizens before the law. The principle of equality between women and men underpins all European policies and is the basis for European integration. It applies in all areas. The principle of equal pay for equal work became part of the Treaty of Rome in 1957. Rule of law. The EU is based on the rule of law. Everything the EU does is founded on treaties, voluntarily and democratically agreed by all its EU countries. Law and justice are upheld by an independent judiciary. The EU countries gave final jurisdiction to the European Court of Justice. Its judgments have to be respected by all. Human rights. Human rights are protected by the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. These cover the right to be free from discrimination on the basis of sex, racial or ethnic origin, religion or belief, disability, age, or sexual orientation. The right to the protection of your personal data, and the right to get access to justice. They were even awarded the Nobel Prize in 2012 for advancing peace. SIG. But they join the club of carpet bomber Kissinger, Afghanistan bomber Obama, and pedo friend Trump. Certainly, the EU does not embrace peace or liberalism or even human rights. Look at the evidence, not the official rhetoric. The destruction of workers, bombing hospitals, the media lies, the unjustified wars, journalists, free speech. A country or union which valued workers and human rights would not destroy workers and human rights in another country.
Since 1990, with a reunified Germany, the EU has been at constant war. It destroyed Yugoslavia, a mini EU, illegally attacked Iraq twice, carpet bombed Afghanistan, performed a coup in Libya to annihilate its wealth, helping its own citizens, and now is provoking nuclear Armageddon by poking the Russian bear. Not 1 inch eastwards was the lie, according to Professor Sachs, amongst many others. It prevents freedom in Bosnia and Catalonia. yet pushes for the Maidan coup in Ukraine and supported Ukro-Nazis in the Donbass war. And to top it all, actively supports the televised genocide in Palestine, further supporting the bombing of Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and Iran. Are these European values? For example, Germany boasts about freedom of speech and opinion in the Grundgesetz or fundamental law, except if you criticize Israel. It was illegal to say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Israel has absolutely no right to exist. Germans exemplify how to make rules and then create counter rules, then fine you. Furthermore, the attacks on protesters by military-style policing, punching civilians and flooring them, is simply state assault. The brown shirts of the 1930s. There will be more problems for Germany by denying liberty and freedom of speech, overtly supporting a televised genocide. Free Palestine. You should use opposites when listening or watching EU Parliament speeches. For example, democracy means no democracy. Freedom of speech, no freedom of speech. Respect human rights, do not respect human rights. Peace, build up the military industrial complex. No hatred, hatred of peoples. Journalism, lying press. People have heard of the French letting dinghies across the channel illegally into the UK with Africans and Asians. But mass immigration is a huge concern. Immigration into the European Union has increased record levels, with approximately 4.2 million individuals arriving annually from non-EU countries and an additional 1.5 million people migrating between EU member states. This sustained flow has brought the total foreign-born population residing in the EU to a historic peak of 64.2 million. Illegal migrants enter from many countries the EU is sanctioning or bombing, and through various routes like the Central Mediterranean route. This remains the busiest corridor. Migrants depart predominantly from Libya and Tunisia in overcrowded boats, aiming for maritime entry points in Italy such as Lampedusa and Sicily, and Malta. And guess who bombed Libya in 2011? Millions of Muslims live in Germany, and the state hates them. These are sowing the seeds of a civil war. The Bundestag is in a difficult situation since it cannot expel millions with echoes of 1930s Nazi policies, nor can it wait since the Muslim birth rate is much higher than native Germans. They can play the waiting game and succeed. This situation is intentionally done in order to change the EU demographic, while European women do not want to have children or identify as LGBTQI+, or want to preserve the world climate. The Kalergi Plan is fully in action. Which EU value is this? The human rights of Europeans? Overregulation is a huge concern. A growing consensus among business leaders and economists suggests that heavy compliance burdens and complex rules are stifling European competitiveness. Look at the combustion engine ban for 2035, or the green energy carbon tax fakery, so-called European Green Deal, to be carbon neutral by 2050. The EU AI Act and Corporate Sustainability Directive impact businesses negatively, and consumers will pay with higher costs. The administrative cost. Companies estimate that the annual administrative burden of EU regulation to be around 150 billion euros annually. Comply or be punished. Pay the EU Department of Bureaucracy. Which EU value is this? There is a controlled shutdown of industry going on for 30 years, exporting jobs and know-how to China, for example. Germany, the largest economy in the EU, has deindustrialized by its own volition, buying in energy at 3 times the price from Norway and USA, not Russia as before. Now it blames Ukraine for blowing up Nord Stream 2, which was masterminded by the Washington regime. Biden even telegraphed it live on television from the White House. Deindustrialization means the auto industry is mostly finished, with Volkswagen to cut tens of thousands of jobs and close down at least one factory. Deindustrialization in the EU is a critical structural and economic challenge driven by energy costs, global competition, lack of critical resources, and strict regulations. Millions of manufacturing jobs have been lost since 2008. High energy intensive sectors, for example chemicals or steel, face permanent shutdowns as European gas prices remain significantly higher than those in the US or China. Quo bono? China and US, of course. Is it a democratic value to shut down the EU industry? Is it part of the group of EU values? Furthermore, active renazification has sent red flags to sane countries. Germany is remilitarizing. The largest army in the EU, the immediate money for weapons taken away from ever poorer Germans, and the constant hatred of Muslims, hatred of Russians, hatred of Palestinians. Keeping the population under a constant fake fear justifies military spending. We must protect ourselves against a threat, is their mantra. What threat? Whoever attacked an EU country since the World War II era? No one. Removing the debt brake or Schuldenbremse in Germany paved the way for an instant €500 billion investment for weapons, whereas the 2026 defence budget was €82.69 billion. They want to be the biggest army in the EU. The shocking lightning admission of Finland and Sweden into NATO without even a referendum or debate has been a shock. Traditionally neutral, both supported the Nazis in World War II. That mask has been removed, and it is plain to see what their intention is. Paying for NATO membership of at least 2.5% GDP, rising to probably 5%, means more taxes for these high social cost countries, and their citizens will suffer. Unquestioning support of colonialist fascist Zionism, using World War II as an excuse to never criticize Jews. If the IDF bombed the Bundestag with non-existent nuclear weapons, Merz would consider it anti-Semitic to criticize, and there would be a news blackout. What EU value is that? Democracy? The economic state is dire, with stagnant wages and economy, mass real unemployment, not just faked government figures, and affordable housing. And the ECB or European Central Bank just prints money. The constant pandering to America. Look at how the insane Trump tariff games were handled. And the NATO spending insanity shows that Brussels' regime is a puppet of Washington and is not answerable to its own citizens. The 2008 financial crash happened due to USA banks cheating and carelessness on mortgage derivatives, then hiding evidence as much as they could before the final collapse. ECB and financial institutions are still vulnerable because they bet on the US dollar, a fiat currency backed by a big gun, overvalued by 20 to 30 times, according to the nation's gold reserves. We have high social costs in Europe and very, very low economic growth. The impact of the next crash will be irrevocable. Instead of reaching out to BRICS, the richest group of nations with huge resources, the Brussels regime excluded itself from the club. Instead, it wants to economically rape Russia, balkanizing the huge diverse country. This is what they did to Yugoslavia. Then China is next, of course. Again, look at the EU values. They do the opposite. 300 journalists have been executed in Palestine, amongst 700,000 plus civilians. The Brussels regime pushes for freedom of press and opinion in other lands except Israel. No integrity or solidarity at all with fellow journalists. It is sickening. The hypocrisy is maddening. Recall the EU bombed the Avila Tower from RTS in Belgrade in 1999, murdering dozens of journalists and support staff, and supported the bombing of Al Jazeera in the Second Gulf War in 2003. But they constantly criticize Russia and Iran, yet ignore that protesters are jailed for waving a flag or internet warriors are arrested for memes. One rule for them, one for us. The press and judicial system is weaponized to attack those not conforming, whether their own citizens or foreign powers, and people they want to take over and economically rape. Official EU statements. The EU External Action Service (EEAS) and high-ranking officials have repeatedly labelled the high death toll of journalists as completely unacceptable, calling for transparent investigations into Israeli bombing. The 27 members cannot consent even on condemnation, let alone sanctions, yet they are quick to find fault in Russia or Iran or China. Look at the actions, not the official rhetoric. Freedom of speech is not an EU value, nor a characteristic. With all these realities on the ground, a future EU looks bleak. The UK already left, Greece nearly did, and others are talking about it. Even Germans. Newly joined countries like Bulgaria and Poland have seen their educated people leave in droves, and future EU members will have to support LGBTQI+, central banks, NGOs, higher taxes, and the demonic genocidal state of Israel, their real values. I give it until 2030 at the very latest. If you got to the end, congratulations. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something and got a different perspective on what is really going on in the world. Please show your appreciation by subscribing and enabling the continuation of the podcasts. Thank you very much.